Hello everybody. It's the first video in a series of videos that I'm making. There is a little procedure that we're going through, I guess you could say, about these videos. I have a list of 10, essentially, topics that you guys are going to be choosing from. And evidently the first one that you all wanted me to cover is the bonus army versus the government compared to a modern civilian movement versus the government. I'll go ahead and start off by saying it's really hard to compare both of those because there is a pretty good divide on the issues. The times that they were experiencing back then in 1932, whenever this whole thing went down, it's not that dissimilar from what we're experiencing today as far as like the Great Recession. They were back in the Depression. One of the worst things that have ever happened to them as far as domestic issues go. And I'm going to do my best to kind of give you a background and a little bit of information about the bonus army and what they were there for and what evidently happened to them, and then kind of give you my thoughts on what I think something similar to that might pan out like. And evidently, humorously enough, there's a march going on right now, a Patriot March, September 9th, and you have a lot of marches going on actually this week. You have the Prepare to Take Back America March, which I believe starts today. It's either them or the Patriot Guild, one of those. The people going over to Washington D.C. and doing their protest thing. They're right. I agree with a lot of what they say, but you're kind of walking into the hornet's nest. Going into D.C. They still enforce the you can't be armed thing, even though the Supreme Court struck that down as unconstitutional. There in D.C. and in Chicago, Illinois, and such. But yeah, you got that march. You got the 2 million biker rally going on, and then you got that million Muslim march going on 2 days from now, on September 11th, the anniversary. Yeah, that's going to be interesting, I'll tell you what. Anyways, getting into the topic at hand. On one of my previous posts, I'd let you all know that I was going to be kind of ranking these videos as far as like length and content. This one is going to be a pretty short one. There isn't really that much information that you guys can't find on the internet that isn't already out there. It's pretty easy to look up. It's a pretty momentous time in our history, as a nation, and it's kind of hard, like I said earlier, to draw a definitive difference between, the bonus army back then and, the different kind of marches and stuff that are, apparently going on, in our current time. And there's a lot of them. Anyways, a little background on the bonus army issue. There was apparently 17,000 different vets, from World War I that had been promised by Congress a bonus check for their participation in the First World War. Now, they were issued certificates, and sometime between the point they were issued and the point before the bonus army actually marched on Washington, Congress had decided through legislation, I think it was the bonus bill is what they called it, and you can look that up on the internet, Wikipedia, whatever. They have some pretty good information. But yeah, these certificates that they were given, they bore face value equal to the promised bonuses of every single one of the vets plus compound interest. That means, from the year that they were given those certificates until they were able to cash them, they would still be accruing money, and that's where that compound interest comes from. For every year, they'd be tacking on and tacking on and tacking on until they were able to cash it. Well, this bill, the bonus bill that they passed, pretty much told the vets that they weren't able to cash their checks, their certificates, until 1945. Evidently enough, the last year of the Second World War, and about this time, you really didn't have any kind of mainstream, war beating or coverage about any kind of Second World War, because that first one was the one to end all wars. Yeah, like I said, it wasn't supposed to be, their funds weren't supposed to be accessible until 1945, and so they went ahead and did a march because it was the Great Depression. Everybody was hurting. The soldiers came back to a country that they couldn't find work in. People were losing their homes, losing their property, having to relocate elsewhere. Take up really trivial and menial jobs to get just a few cents to pay their bills and everything. So, like I said, about 17,000 vets decided to gather up and rally in D.C., and they called themselves the Bonus Army. In total, there's about 43,000 people in D.C. That would be including their friends and family that decided to go along, and any kind of associated organizations, whether it's civil rights or the like. Anyways, President Hoover was in office at this time, and I know you guys are familiar with the term Hoovervilles and everything like that. The big tent cities and shit. Well, the lead constable of the Washington D.C. police, who was also an Army vet, he was sympathetic to the cause and gave them a couple of areas to where, he allocated an area to where they can set up their main camp and, do their parade and everything like that. I believe the main camp was right across the Potomac in Virginia, and a couple of other camps started to spring up in Washington, D.C., and that's where that came from and everything like that. Well, day after day the protests continued and everything like that. It was pretty peaceful. The one thing that I would like to note is not many of the actual veterans went to D.C. armed. Now there were given your few that felt it was their right and felt that they needed to protect themselves just in case anything were to happen, like what little they did have was stolen from them, or if someone tried to assault them. I mean, it's just basic Second Amendment concerns. An interesting thing about that is during the whole onset of the process of the march and the petitioning and everything like that for these certificates to be valid, to be cashed in at that time, United States Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler visited the camps, and he pretty much showed his outright support for the movement. He sympathized with them. He visited the camp, shook hands, talked with the guys, and he basically put his all behind the effort. And he understood where they were coming from, and I mean, it's really hard not to whenever you look at it. However, the protests and marches, continued, and the PD, Police Department of Washington, D.C. was getting a little, I guess, paranoid, because these marches were getting more boisterous. They were getting, pretty angry that their grievances weren't being addressed. And so on July 28th, Attorney General Mitchell ordered all of the vets and their families, their camps, everything, to be removed from Washington, D.C. So, Chief of Staff Douglas MacArthur, took up the reins, and at first the Washington, D.C. Police Department was tasked with this. This led to a confrontation with the vets because they didn't want to leave. They wanted their grievances to be heard. And the resulting violence, initiated by the police department, resulted in, if I'm not mistaken, anywhere from 2 to 6 veterans' deaths. And you guys can, can imagine, the back and forth going on there. It's like, no, they rushed us, so we, sought a means to violence to end the threat, on behalf of the police. And then, the other side, claiming innocence, that they were just there for the march and trying to have their voices heard. Well, on July 28th, Douglas MacArthur commanded the 12th Regiment Infantry, the 3rd Regiment Cavalry, and 6 tanks to force all of the vets who were refusing to go out of D.C. It should be noted also that Dwight Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, in the future, had confronted MacArthur about this, and he says, he claimed to have said to him, "I told the dumbass, or the dumb son of a bitch, not to go out there." So just to give you a little thing, a little trivial piece of information there. There was a lot of common sense dudes that were really against pushing them out. Anyhow, Douglas MacArthur took the troops and completely razed all the camps that were there in D.C. And something to be noted, I don't know if you guys had ever come across this information or not, but it is said that Douglas MacArthur was under the impression that these people were trying to overthrow the government or to commit like a coup of some sort. That's really kind of like a bullshit perspective, but I mean, it's what he believed, I guess. So you can't really say too much about that. Anyways, he had gone above and beyond the call of duty, and instead of just simply, removing the vets and their families and their camps out of D.C., he crossed the Potomac with the army and completely razed and destroyed the camp in Virginia. Now, there's a lot of tear gas used, a lot of family members of the vets had perished. There was a couple of children that were admitted to have died in the raids. It was because of the tear gas that was involved. They couldn't breathe and everything like that. And that was one of the big grievances about the outcome of this, bonus march being destroyed by the government. Essentially, the point of the march was for the government to uphold their promise of the payout of bonuses, and instead of, or rather than, them, pussyfooting around the issue and pushing it back and pushing it back. They wanted the money now because they needed it now, and if you have like any kind of basic understanding of economics, then you know that people that don't have money can't spend money, therefore can't contribute to the economy and help it improve. Well, that was kind of where they stood on that, and it was a promise of pay, and they sought to, make the government good on its promise. Eventually, this whole thing eventually came to a point when, in 1933, Roosevelt was forced by Congress to pay over $2 billion in bonuses to the vets. And, they didn't have to wait until 1945, so essentially, even though they lost in that quote-unquote battle, they eventually won the quote-unquote war. They got their bonuses, and, that was basically the end of that. Now, as far as comparing that to, a citizen movement or something of the like of today, I would say that regardless of whether you went armed or unarmed, you can expect, without a doubt, the government pushing back, whether it be in the police department or if they actually, believe you to be a threat enough to, call out the National Guard or the Army. I mean, their forces are about 10-15 minutes away, and they can react in 10-15 minutes. So, I mean, regardless, you're like stepping right into the hornet's nest and, stirring shit up. But, yeah, comparing it to back then, I mean, different issues. same response is my perspective on it. I think that you would see the same kind of oppression, suppression of the people and their grievances. We all know that the government really doesn't listen to us, in the point that they hear us, but they don't acknowledge our real concerns, and they don't act appropriately to address them. Now, I'm not, saying that any one of these marches coming up is going to result in violence. I'm just saying expect it, because the government has shown before with the bonus army that it is not afraid to use its army, Air Force, whatever, National Guard, police, to completely just destroy any real hopes of your grievances being addressed. And that's essentially, a profound violation of everybody's First Amendment rights, regardless of whether you're part of that movement, march, protest, whatever, or not. If you liked my little coverage of the topic, go ahead and subscribe to the channel here. Give me some feedback in the comments below. I'm going to leave those open. If there's anything that I didn't address that you would like for me to make a follow-up video on, please go ahead and do that. You guys are basically in charge. So thanks for watching the video. Thanks for your participation in the topic selection and the votes. And after I post this video, the votes are going to be open for the next topic, so make sure to visit my Facebook page and put in your 2 cents. Go ahead and vote which topic that you want me to cover next. As always, God bless, and long live the Republic.